So here we sit, preachers' wives, and I'm just curious what all of you think. What are some words that come to mind as far as a stereotypical preacher's wife? I mean, do you think that most people think that preachers' wives have their Bibles memorized, basically, and they are very serious and are, what else?
I think
What are some other things that we are not?
I think the first time I experienced it firsthand towards myself, and it wasn't really even in a negative, or I was just like, oh, whoa, this is me now. Like, I am the preacher's wife, I guess, was I spoke at a ladies' day, a ladies' retreat at the beginning of this year. And at night, there was a game night. And there were some of the younger ladies, and they were playing like a word game or something. And some of the words that they were like, there was like a crude word wrote at one point, or it was, I mean, not even, it wasn't even any, it was silly is what it was. It was just silly. And they looked at me and they were like, I can't even remember what they said, but they were like, she's here, like we need to, yeah, and they weren't even trying to be, rude about it, but it was the first time that I thought, guys, like, it's, that don't put on anything for me,
Yeah.
That's
Just like y'all?
yeah,
Just like y'all?
yeah. But it was just kind of they were playing a silly game and saying silly things, and thought maybe that I didn't know how to be silly,
Preachers'
or
wives
couldn't
can't be
take a
silly.
joke, or couldn't, that was the first time, but I mean, that was so minor, and so.
Yeah. Have y'all not ever experienced any expectations, maybe that you should be a certain way because you're the preacher's wife or the preacher's family? How many of you were elders' kids or preacher's kids?
I was a preacher's kid. I was an elder's kid. But I was gone from home by the time my dad became an elder.
Yeah. I was a preacher's kid. Well, I honestly, personally, have never really felt a whole lot of pressure to be a certain set of words because I was a preacher's wife or an elder's kid or a preacher's kid. But I think there's some people that do have an idea of what a preacher's wife should look like. And I mean, I think of knowing your Bible really well and being serious often, not laughing at silly things. And I don't know, I think that perceptions play a part in what people think about the preacher's family. So have you ever felt like you live in a fishbowl? I think we talked about this a little bit before. Have you ever felt like you live in a fishbowl? As in, people are looking at you and you're just doing your daily life and everybody can see what you're doing and what you're wearing and how you live. And
I mean, I've received enough comments to know that at least some people are paying extra attention to what I'm wearing or what I'm doing, but that doesn't make me feel like overall that's what the vast majority of people are thinking.
Not
Like,
necessarily negative comments or positive?
Just not negative or positive, just comments to know that they are very much paying attention to my choices and what we do. But that doesn't give me anxiety. It just kind of goes with the territory, and it's not something I dwell on, and I don't think that that's the vast majority. I've always felt like our home has been very respected, and our private family time has been respected.
Yeah.
The extent to which I sometimes feel like we live in a fishbowl has more to do with Gary's bivocational, so his non-preaching job. He's known in town, and so when we go to a restaurant or we go to Lowe's, people recognize him. And so there's an extent to which our family is looked at and recognized. And a lot of people know that he's also a preacher. So when you have people outside the church knowing that he's also a preacher, that can sometimes feel like you're getting judged extra, not just for being a known entity, but also being a Christian as a known entity. And only one time have we ever had anybody ever say anything, but negative. I mean, like, people will say stuff to us when we're in public, but
A criticism.
Yes.
We've experienced very little, maybe because we're not taking it that way for the most part. I'm sure it happens, and I know for a fact You know, one of the members drove by and took a picture of my husband mowing the yard and criticized what he had on for that activity and shared it with a lot of people. You know, so it does happen, but we don't in general feel that fishbowl feeling, I guess.
Would you say your kids ever felt it or said anything about it growing up? Any of y'all?
One of the three of ours
Yeah.
did, but I think it was a phase maybe.
Yeah, a
But yeah.
self-conscious
So not even all
period.
three of ours have
Yeah.
really.
Have yours?
Just mention briefly, you know, sometimes in Bible class they'll say, well, they expected me to know the answer because my dad's the preacher. Or maybe someone corrects their behavior a little bit more harshly than, like, don't run in the building or don't sit this way. Would your parents want you to be doing that? But not overly, again, it's not overly so, but I think it goes back to what Cherie is saying. It's how you take it. If you're looking for those things, then you're surely going to find them.
Sure. Did your boys ever feel fishbowl?
Not very much, and we didn't even know about it until after they were grown, and only one of our three sons made a comment that he felt like there were a little bit higher expectations, like you mentioned, with the knowledge or the behavior, but it really wasn't that big of a deal. You always hear about the fishbowl, and I know it's supposed to be a thing, but I haven't really experienced it that much. And when I'm thinking back over it, I guess there have been a few comments that maybe I was supposed to take that way. You know, like somebody came up to me one time and said, I noticed you were tapping your foot during the prayer. And I was like, were your eyes open during the prayer? You know, where I'm always tapping my foot. And I guess I could have taken that in a fishbowl kind of way, but I didn't. You know, he could have said that to anybody. Or people have said things about what I do with my hair or where I stand in the building, you know, that if I was looking for something to be upset about, I might say, they're only saying that because I'm the preacher's wife, but I just don't feel that way. I think that we notice things about other people all the time, regardless of how they serve or who they are.
Yeah, I think it's very much an attitude, or there's another word that I'm not thinking of that's better than attitude, but it's what are we looking for a comment to have, like,
You're assigning motives to
assumptions.
people. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Well, there's a saying that that expectations are premeditated resentments. Yes. So what do we expect? I mean, I think that going into ministry, you know, some of us, I think, who have grown up with it, born into it, maybe if we had a bad experience with it, we might have gone into life as a preacher's wife, worried about how it was going to be. But if we're expecting something, like you said, we're gonna find what we are looking for. So what are we looking for? Or what are we expecting to find? And I think sometimes we're expecting to find criticism when it's not criticism.
Sometimes it is. Sometimes
Sure.
it is and sometimes it's not. I just, now that you made us remember, I remembered a time somebody came up to me and said, tonight in the Wednesday night, you know, devotional after class, you were up there on row 2 and you were yawning the whole time, and it just didn't look very nice for the preacher's wife to be up there yawning. And I was like, I mean, I didn't even know I was yawning. First of all, it was Wednesday night. I was probably exhausted because I teach and stuff. But they specifically said, because you're the preacher's wife, you know, blah, blah, blah. So sometimes they do have a standard and, you know, well, what was that look on your face about or something? Well, I don't know what it was. You know, I don't even know what I was doing at that moment. Yeah. So it does happen. I'm not going to discount the people who think it's happening, because it can happen.
Yeah. Sure.
But how are we going to take that then?
How did you handle it? Do you remember?
I just thought, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't be yawning. As a Christian, you know, maybe I'm going to pay more attention to whether or not I'm yawning on Wednesday night. And so I just made a course correction a little bit and tried not to give off the attitude of boredom, which it wasn't at all. I was just tired. So.
I just try to laugh stuff like that off. I would be like, well, I guess I need to talk to the preacher about being more interesting.
Yeah.
You know.
See, that's good. Humor's a good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I probably would get prickly, and my hackles would be raised if somebody said that to me, because I tend to don't. This is a bad thing about me. I don't receive correction very well, but I think
Well,
that's.
I don't either, but.
I guess it would depend on who it comes from, and if they have a relationship with you, and if there's any merit to it. But
I probably would have laughed it off in the moment and handled it the way I was supposed to, and then on the way home been like, Neil, Mama Can you believe it?
Well, what can we do? What can we do as preachers' wives to help what others' perceptions are about what a preacher's family looks like? I mean, we were talking last night. You were expressing how Andy handles work, separating work and the preacher's role, and I think that would be a great thing for you to start off with, talking about that.
Yeah, he has made the effort as far as when we're new to the congregation, and usually in his opening sermon, you know, we're grateful to be here, and he weaves it in much more eloquently than I would say it, but just that, you know, we're here to work alongside you, and we're not, you know, here we're not. See, it's already more eloquent than me. But you know, my children are children just like your kids, and we need to, you know, I'd appreciate it if you don't refer to them as the preacher's kid. They're just kids like everybody else.
Don't hold them to any higher standard than anybody else. Yeah.
I imagine we have a lot more influence over that whole thing than we think we do, because, you know, if we make it a deal, it'll be a deal. But probably people are thinking about us a lot less than we think they are.
Really?
And just not making that big of a deal out of it. You know, you're married to the preacher, big whoop. You know, and I know how, you know, some don't like to be introduced as the preacher's wife, and they'll say things like, I have a name, or, you know, I'd rather you introduce me as my name. When people aren't trying to make a big deal out of you being the preacher's wife, they're usually introducing you to somebody else, and they're helping that person connect the dots. You see the preacher, they go together. Here's one of our elders, this is his wife. Here, you know, they're just helping people connect the dots, and they're not trying to make it a thing. But we do sometimes. And if we don't, and we just graciously let them introduce us however they want, it's not a deal.
Nobody probably wants to go down this road, but has your husband ever made you feel like this is a certain way you should act because we are the preacher's family? I mean, I don't think that John ever has, but I think there are some unspoken things out there that we want to, you know, make sure that we're there on time. You know, what kind of an example is it if the preacher walks in late, and which, you know, would not be a good thing responsibility-wise, but we're not going to go there or do this or do that because we're setting an example. And I get some of that. I think all of us are to be an example, but not to set ourselves out there as a role model or a standard or on a pedestal for other people to emulate. But I just think that perceptions can be, you know, like we've been saying, we're the ones maybe looking more into it than we should.
I find it. I was going to say I find it a lot more challenging sometimes. Not so much in the church, but just in the community when I'm trying to get involved. I try very hard not to, to say ask them what does your husband do, because then you can see the change, the relationship immediately. But I don't necessarily experience that in the church as much. So.
I don't remember exactly how you worded the question just a minute ago, but what came to mind to me was I think it's important for us to be hospitable within our congregation. Like, the more people you have into your home that you spend time with away from the church building, the more they're going to get to know you. They're going to understand you. They're going to start seeing how your kids act at home, and that I think building relationships with people is always going to help dispel any ideas that somebody might have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or at least I would hope it would
Very good
dispel.
That is so true, and really it helps us to look at ourselves, because if we think that people don't know us well and they're misjudging us and have these unrealistic expectations, maybe we haven't allowed them to get to know us and formed those relationships. That's a great point.
Because you really get to know somebody spending time eating
in their home.
around a table, eating a meal, and especially on your home turf.
But I think there are some who have ideas that people's perceptions of us as the preacher's family, it prevents us from opening our home because we're afraid that they're going to see who we really are. And there's a certain way that we should be, and this is how we are. I'm not talking about sinful things. I'm just talking about your kids burp at the table. Can I say that? Or they?
Your kids do. No.
Yeah. They did.
They never grow out of that.
But-
or how clean your house is,
Yeah.
or, you know, all those.
Well, that's
Right.
exactly where my mind went with this, was how to like integrate that into showing the members of the church that you're normal, you're just like them, you're figuring it out just like them. And we are very hospitable in the way that we love having people in our home. I'm more of the extrovert than Colton is, but we both love it. We love being around people. That's how we get fueled. That's how we get energized. And so that's always come naturally to us. And I also love things to be pretty. Like and that's not, it's just something I enjoy doing. I like making things pretty. I like making, my house to be clean and things. But I've almost now, with kids, it's almost out of my hands. It can't be that way all the time, not by choice. But I've almost, when I am hosting things or having people over, I tidy and, make sure it looks not filthy, but I've almost taken the extra step to let it be home. Yeah, and maybe that's because I have the kids in there. It's a little out of my hands whether I want it to be or not, but I want the people that I bring into our home to feel comfortable. I think allowing our friends and brothers and sisters to just feel comfortable in my house, and then we are just ourselves, and then it helps them open up, and then it becomes that relationship where they see we're real, we see they're real. And so I've almost kind of taken the extra step of, I don't have to put every single dish away on that rack, just leave it. Prove that we just live life here, and our kids go crazy and there's messes. And we hosted Friendsgiving at the congregation we're at, and we had so many families and little kids running around, and it was one of those things where I didn't clean up the little baby potty in the guest bathroom before people got there, and I forgot, and another mom went in there, and I really ripped that Band-Aid off, where I was like, so sorry, I'll clean that, I'll get that. And they're like, we got this, let's do this together. And we just kind of had this funny little mom moment where we're cleaning up my kids' mess together, first time in my house. But it's things like that I'm really grateful to have those kind of uncomfortable moments, because it does kind of set the...
Yeah, kind of rips down those perceptions. That maybe
breaks down the
people might
walls
have.
from the beginning, so...
Yeah, and I know y'all better because you've been in my house. You've spent time there.
We can do that with our homes and our personalities, trying to make people comfortable around us. And, I'm not saying there won't ever be awkward moments, because sometimes I'm an awkward person. That has nothing to do with the fact that I'm a preacher's wife. That's just me. But I think if we're trying to make people comfortable in our presence, in our homes, in our work together in ministry, and we help them see that this is togetherness, we're serving alongside everybody else, it kind of helps with some of that
We're a family.
perception. Yeah, we're a family.
And families sometimes make messes.
Yeah, show the messy side sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, that's not to say that it's a little bit of a sidetrack maybe to this, but sometimes a congregation needs something specific from the preacher's wife. And that's been something that I've noticed moving from congregation to the next. This congregation really needs the preacher's wife to walk out with him and stand with him at the back of the building, because the prior preacher became divorced during his time there, and they felt that void of not having someone standing next to the preacher. And so if you can discern what that is, what is it that this church needs from you, that's kind of the way I would take it. And so then it's not really a perception, but it is in another way, because you're doing something for them that you can do, that you're uniquely situated to do.
That's a good point. I remember hearing about a congregation that a friend went to, and the elders asked them to not draw the blinds. They had a parsonage, and they asked them to not draw the blinds in the front living room or whatever, which they thought was the strangest request. But they came to learn that the previous preacher and his family were there, always had the blinds drawn. No one ever was welcomed in. This is what they were told anyway. And they, it's kind of an unusual request, like, don't draw the blinds. Yeah, but when we are willing to do things that are maybe uncomfortable, and to show them that, okay, we're going to do this so that y'all will know that we welcome you into our home. We're going to draw the blinds at night and not walk in front of the windows at night with the lights on, but being willing to be all things to all people, what they need. So that's a really good point.
And that's kind of, I've been struggling to come up with the words, but being all things to all people, if I recognize that maybe what I wear is going to be a stumbling block to somebody, I'm gonna, in the congregation, well, then I'm gonna be paying more attention to that just because I'm the preacher's wife, but I don't have to begrudge that. It's how I look at it.
You're ministering to them.
That's right.
Yeah. And maybe over time they'll grow to understand that that might not be a reasonable expectation, but you're willing to do it.
And I may be wrong. I may be completely wrong about this, but I don't. My perception is that the preacher's wife wardrobe, for the lack of a better word, expectations like that are kind of gone.
Yeah.
Like, at least I perceive them to be.
I think it matters where in the country.
That's true.
True.
It's absolutely
And
true.
generationally too.
And generationally is what I would think. But sure,
And that's what I was thinking. It's not a matter of like modesty, of course, but just
Right.
yeah.
It's preference.
Yeah, because in some areas I've noticed that it's just a more formal way that you're walking out with your husband, and I've rarely done that, just because, honestly, because he would just walk out and I would have to climb over people to go out with him. So I just rarely have done that. But I think you usually walk out with Neil. I don't guess that has anything to do with perception.
I don't
but-
do it at Westside, but there were 2 different congregations where our first work, where they asked me to, and then another work where there had been the divorce, and you could just tell they just needed to see the solidarity. Yes.
Yeah, I can see that.
I
That's a
don't
good
do
point.
it at Lehman Avenue, but I imagine Neil would like me to.
To walk out with him. Yeah. To greet people.
And I guess I would if he pushed it. That's one of those awkward moments for me. I feel like when I'm walking by,
Oh,
like,
I
do
know.
high
Me
five
too.
people on the way back?
I just catch up to Gary. Like, as soon as the sermon is over, that's his exit, so he leaves.
Yeah.
But I stay in the pew until it's over, and
I
then
did that at Cole
I'll catch up
Harbor.
to the back door.
He would meet me at my pew and walk me to the back, and I was always like,
Yeah. Where do you look? Like down up?
look
Yeah.
down, look at people, and nobody's looking. Nobody cares. It's all
Yeah,
me. I know.
exactly.
I know.
Nobody cares.
Well, right now I have a few excuses because I've got a toddler dragging me out.
Yeah,
So I'm
Yeah.
not far behind.
You get a pass.
Sometimes I'm already out, and other times I'm not far behind Colton because I'm like, all right, let's go. Got to get Emily to the back. Let's go. But so that kind of helps my case. But I was going to say that I don't, and I know, I'm just beginning in this journey as the preacher's wife, but I don't feel intimidated by that term. I don't feel afraid of being described as that, because to me, it's just a small description, but it is a description of me. And it is, if my husband were a lawyer, you're the lawyer's wife in town, the lawyer in town, you're his wife, and so to me, it's that I just try to keep it very simple in my mind, as when someone, and I've had it done at our congregation now, where I was introduced as that, just from another member who was introducing me to somebody else, and that's the connection. Like, they see that man preaching, well, this is the woman, this is who he's married to, and so
It's a description.
I have to just keep it simple in my mind. If I overthink it and I'm like, man, is that all I really am? It's not that deep. And maybe for some it is, but I'll let them deal with those thoughts if that's their thoughts about it. But for me, I've kind of been training myself early to think that way about anything, whether it's a small criticism or it's a correction or it's a suggestion. I just tell myself it's a very simple thing, and it's not that big of a deal, and it's not that hard to. There's some things that I haven't experienced it yet, and so I'm not going to act like it doesn't happen, but just unreasonable expectations I know are out there probably. Thankfully, I haven't experienced that yet, but as, the little ones that have come to me, I'm just like, it's the least I could do to try to appease this person or do this. It's the least I could do with all the blessings that I'm gaining of being in this position as the preacher's wife. What's the big deal? It's this tiny sacrifice and this big lump of blessings that I'm getting of being in this position. So
rather than being resentful, I'm
I'm gonna
acquiesce.
Embrace.
Mhm.
Yeah.
in a way,
Embrace
I
it.
just embrace it, let it go, tweak a little thing if I need to, and
Just
and then move on.
Philippians 2 it right all over the place, huh?
Yeah.
Thinking of others better than yourself.
It's just not, I try not to like ball it up into this big thing that needs to be, because if you do that, you're just hurting yourself.
Well, along
Yeah.
those lines, I'll go ahead and finish.
No,
up.
I was just agreeing with what she said.
Along those lines, where do you think the devil uses perception? As
How long
far
you
as-
got?
Well, where does he use perceptions? I mean, I think we can act one way. We can decide we're going to handle this the right way, and Philippians 2 it all over the place. Or we can have a chip on our shoulder, and which one are we going to choose? Who are we going to serve, I guess? We're gonna
I think the
serve.
devil knows if I've got a poor attitude. I'm sure that there are preachers' wives who they married their husband and then he decides to be a preacher and she's not yet on board with being that preacher's wife, and so if she's not on board with that, the devil's going to use every little thing, and it can be something as simple as her getting irritated every time she hears, well, this is the preacher's wife. You know, that's who you are. If you're married to the mailman, you're the mailman's wife. The devil can use the smallest seed, like the princess and the pea, just get it up under your skin pretty easily.
Yeah. We want to be more than the preacher's wife. And we are more than the preacher's wife, but we have to be realize where it's coming from and not be so easily offended by things like that. What about thinking about how many of us at this table would consider ourselves introverts?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I think
I'm
probably.
an extroverted introvert, I feel
Yes.
like.
Yeah, I
that.
am too. I've become that because of this life, I think.
Yeah.
I'm extroverted in this situation, but I refuel by
Same.
myself.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
exactly the same.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking that might be one area where the devil's going to use perception that, I'm an introvert. I can't do this. And just refuse to engage in what it means to be a preacher's wife. I mean,
I think he uses that within the church.
I was just
in
about
general.
to say it's not just preachers' wives.
That is
We all
every,
have to.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah. We were talking about that in ladies' class about a week or two ago, and I was really introverted growing up. I was the shyest kid. I could never hardly even say hi to somebody without just just being all shaky. And high school was terrible because I had to do that speech class where you have to stand up. I thought I was going to pass out, hyperventilating, all that, because that was not me. Well, now I'm in this role. Well, a lot of us feel that way, and it came out in ladies' class. We feel that, we feel at church when we come into the room. Well, somebody says, well, maybe no one's speaking to me, and I said, yeah. What helped me to get out of that was, I'm not walking into the room saying, here I am, positive or negative. Here I am, proud, or here I am, don't judge me. So positive or negative, I'm walking into the room and saying, here you are. I'm so glad to see you. And you totally get outside yourself and look at who else is there and what can you say to them and how can you encourage them. And that's something that
it's not all
helped
about me. I mean, that's what this is about, basically, this perception. It's not all about me.
Right.
And we get so tied up in our own heads about
Yes.
what people think about me,
Self-criticism,
something that I said
yeah.
that was dumb, or I thought it
Right.
was dumb, and nobody's thinking anything. We're the ones curled up in the back of the car, worried about what we said that was dumb. So I think that the devil uses that.
I mean, really, what's best for the church? What's best for God's family? And I know. Let me see how to word this. Preacher's wife who just comes in and sits down in her pew, and she never gets up. She never talks to anybody. She doesn't engage. And the attitude is one of, they hired my husband, not me. And I don't feel like I should have to. I'm an introvert. I don't feel like I should have to do all this stuff just because I married the preacher. That may or may not be true. But I think it's sad that she has chosen to approach it in that way. Because we all need to be encouraging each other and building each other up, preacher's wife or not,
That's right.
as y'all have been saying, as a Christian.
That's right.
But how unfortunate for her husband in trying to do the work there that she's not willing to help him in every way possible. And how unfortunate for that congregation that they're missing out on getting to know her and be encouraged by her and You know, and I know some people do feel that way. They've hired my husband, not me, and I'm not trying to invalidate those feelings, see how careful I'm being here. But I just think it's a sad mindset. And why not go into it as teammates, as God's servants together? You'll be closer in your marriage. Your family will see that relationship. The church will grow and blossom because of it. You know, so if we, again, get the focus off of ourselves, we keep going back to that. It's not about me. It's not about a perceived role. It's about, I'm a part of this body. I'm the thumb. I'm the pinky toe. Whatever it is, what can I do to fulfill that role to the best of my ability? All the talents that God's given me, I want to give it back to Him the best that I can.
Serving quietly as a Christian woman. That's what a
Yeah.
preacher's wife is to me. I mean, in some areas and sometimes it's not necessarily quietly. You might be teaching a class or leading a study, something like that. But I think for most of us sitting around this table, what our role is serving quietly as a Christian woman behind the scenes, and sometimes not. But I'm more than satisfied with that. I think that's what God wants for all of women to be. So to me, a preacher's wife just happens to be married to the preacher, and she's a Christian because that's what God expects her to be. But how do we encourage women who might be feeling these expectations? What would you say to any woman, but maybe particularly younger women who are approaching this in their life, or they're new to it, or what would you say? I mean, Katie, you have a unique perspective because you're there, but what would all of you say to encourage a young woman who's about to embark on that?
I will say, being in it, I do have two pieces of advice that, you know, I've given myself, but also I would say to other younger women in this role is, one, you set the tone in your home. And it's really dangerous when we have a hard heart towards this work. It's really dangerous. And the whole home will feel that. And so, I mean, I would say that to other women, but I, of course, say that to myself first.
So you're damaging your marriage, is kind of what you're saying, if you don't.
All of it. I think you're damaging you're putting, the relationship with your husband and his work at risk, the relationship with your kids and their relationship to the church. I think that's just such a risk to take whenever you have a sour attitude about the work that we're in.
And your attitude to the church.
Exactly. And you can't hide that. And I think that if you're not careful, it's just a really dangerous game to play when you have a sour attitude about being the preacher's wife. And if you start out that way, it can be really hard to get back. And so that's the first, is you set the tone in your home, because it's just going to bleed out from you. Because the husband, he's going to come home and have tough days, and we haven't been doing it long, but there have been tough days. And when he feels inadequate, when he feels it's not, am I doing the right thing? Is this worth it? Is it even, it's just the devil getting in his head. And if you already have that attitude towards the work, it's just going to fuel the fire. And I think that's how, going back to how Satan works, that's giving him fuel. And then the second, careful to not squander the opportunity you've been given in this role. And it kind of goes back to what I said earlier. I think back to being in this role and all the blessings it's brought me. And I've had some friends in school, and I am the extrovert. So it's not always easy. I don't say that like I can just step into any room and just do all the things and be whatever. But it does come a little more natural to me to just be a people person. So I feel like I've been blessed in that way, that I can just kind of talk to anybody. And I do have discomfort, and uncomfortable moments. But I've had some friends in school when I was going through school, and student wives, and they were just so petrified of starting the work. And like, what do I even do? How do I even do this? And I was like, just be yourself and say yes to things. I think that has been such a blessing for me is saying yes to the opportunities that have been presented. And a lot of them have made me uncomfortable. This in particular maybe might be one of them. But it's, you know, I think that if you know, let your discomfort stifle you in this role, or you say, oh, they hired my husband, not me, I don't need to say yes to any of these things. I just think about all the things, if I would have had that attitude and said no, that I would not have met the people I met or been in the same room as some people that just like fed me God's love and wisdom and just poured into me. So it's just always, I had to step out and say yes. But I just think, what a blessing to have more opportunities being the preacher's wife. I mean, there are, you know, I mean, of course, everybody, we're all on level playing fields, but we are presented with, you know, unique opportunities. And what a shame if we're too afraid to step through that door, or if we're too have a bad attitude about it and, well, that's not my job. You know, call my husband to go do that. You know, not me. It's just, what a shame.
So set the tone and don't squander opportunities.
Yeah, those are my two
your pieces of advice.
And in summary, those are huge, I think.
They're great.
I was going to add to, I was thinking along the same lines of Katie, as how our attitude makes our husband's job harder or easier. So if we really get into even a little bit of bitterness about something, that can really affect him. And we're his number one supporter. So if we're going down and we're not being able to be that support for him, that's really dangerous for him. So that husband piece is really a good thing to say. And then I was going to add that when I was younger, I was blessed with some elders' wives who kind of took me under their wing and mentored me. And I wanted to say that if you're willing to be mentored, that is kind of a good thing, because it helped me. Things I didn't know, I just didn't know. I just wouldn't have thought of some things that I could be doing, and so they just kind of took me along. Let's go do this, and thank God for them, because we need those older women to do those, you know, the mentoring. But we also need to be willing to be mentored.
Yeah. Have the right heart for that.
The right heart for that, and not just go into a congregation thinking, okay, I know everything that I'm going to do, and here's my lines, and this is my slot, and that's it, because it might not be.
Do we want to encourage other women to marry preachers? You know, and if our demeanor in that is going to influence future generations, we need men to preach. We need men to fill those pulpits and have the beautiful feet, and they need good wives supporting them. And you know, it's a privilege, and it's a beautiful thing, and it's okay to be happy being the preacher's wife. We should give ourselves permission to love the role, enjoy ministry, and not be afraid to tell people that. And if people say, oh, you're the preacher's wife, I'm like, yes, I am. You know, I want to look like I love being married to the preacher, and that I love the preacher. And if I were to say, well, my name is Kathy, you know, I have a name, you know, and I met one time who said, I am not my husband. And I was thinking, you don't like him very much either. I mean, it just, you know, what kind of impression are we giving off, not just everybody meeting us for the first time and then creating this awkward, well, now what do I do with that? Yeah. But for young women coming up and, you know, looking at us and our roles, and what if they need to be the ones marrying and supporting the preachers for the congregation moving forward. I mean, we just don't realize sometimes our attitude and demeanor and the things we say. And I wonder if we feel like this is how we're supposed to feel, like we're supposed to feel defensive and we're supposed to feel like, oh, people have these expectations, when really it's not.
Yeah.
It is a blessing.
I wonder where that comes from.
Satan is a sly old fox.
Well, ultimately, yeah, from him. But I mean, I think we passed that down. And, you know, maybe in some preacher training schools there have been some well-meaning, but people who have had bad experiences who are warning, this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and you better be ready when this happens, and this is what you should say. And I'm sorry about that. I feel terrible for women who have encountered that. In fact, I know it's happened. I don't want to discount the fact that bad things have happened to preachers' families, but is it not true that bad things happen to all families everywhere? And I mean, if you're going to be a Christian, this world, it's not your home, and it's where we live, and it's where we're sojourning, but struggles happen with all families. But when you're in the ministry and you thrive in your role and you want to be in your role and you're enjoying the blessings that God gives you because you're in that, more and more blessings come from being in the preacher's family, the preacher's wife. So I love those pieces of advice. What about y'all?
There are two words that kind of, I think, sum up what everybody is trying to say that have come to my mind, and it's genuineness. Be who you are, because nobody wants, and be consistently you. Yes, you may be more introverted or more extroverted, but people want to see that you're the person, same person in your home and in the church building, and not trying to be fake, but then also being flexible. So consistency, I guess consistency is the first word of being genuine, and flexibility is the second, because it may be that you've slaved and cooked a wonderful family dinner and somebody calls and wants to be baptized, and that's where the blessings come in, and realizing we get to see that firsthand and not have to begrudge it.
I would agree with everything. Going last, y'all have already shared the wisdom, but I would say be who you are. Like, don't act like something you're not, unless you have a bad attitude, and then you need to fake it till you make it. But be who you are, and be open and honest, and that can dispel a lot of the whatever they think you are or aren't. If you're being genuinely who you are, then that can dispel that. And one of the things that Katie said about setting the tone, that's very much, that's just leadership. And, you know, we don't like to think of ourselves as the leaders, but in we are. We're part of the, you know, women are looking to us for leadership. Children are looking to us for leadership. We're all leaders in some way, and the leader sets the tone, always.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought that up, because I wrote that down on a different subject that we'll talk about, but the church needs strong female leaders. And obviously not talking about a role that we're not to be in, but haven't you all been in congregations where there were strong women leaders, and the church is stronger, where there's strong women who are willing to take on leadership among the places where they're supposed to. But even just in friendships, to be a spiritual influence, to, like you were saying earlier, talk about, not be afraid to bring up a spiritual topic or have a spiritual conversation. But I think we've been where there have not been those strong women spiritual leaders, and the church suffers. So what can we do to be strong? I mean, we've talked about spiritual growth, but how can we?
We got to be willing to grow. We be who we are, but we also realize God is working on us. He's still working on us.
Yeah,
be
really,
willing
yeah.
to stretch and grow. Yeah.
And when you say yes, and then you say yes, and then you say yes, when you look back on your yeses, you can draw some lines.
Yeah.
Like, I can get you to this table tracing back to yeses, which I won't do, but I could.
Yeah. Yeah. It's blessings. God, you
Yes.
when you don't say no, when you say yes, yeah, it's fun to look back on those blessings. What are the things that maybe we have been afraid of thinking about going into ministry? I don't remember, all of you went into your marriage knowing that you were going to be a preacher's wife. I think most of us did. Were there things that you were afraid of, perception-wise, that you were afraid of having to face? Nobody was afraid of anything.
I think for me, being the finance major and the money person, that was the perception that preachers don't make any money, and that it was always going to be a financial struggle. Was something that made me very apprehensive. But we've always been well taken care of. So.
Yeah, that's a good one to think about. What else have we been afraid of? I think, as an introvert, have you been afraid of having to teach a Bible class, or?
Yeah, for sure. In the first Bible class I taught, I stood up there and bawled my eyes out, because it was hard for me to talk about such serious down to the core of who we really are matters in front of a room full of people. I don't know. It just got to my emotions the first time, and I cried, and then everybody in the room cried, and we all cried together, and it was great. But anyway, yeah. So we're going to have our little things that were maybe look like hurdles, and I agree with that financial thing, and it is still real. And it's still real, especially if it's a church that has a preacher's home, where you're living in a house that doesn't belong to you, and then your certain expectations may be there regarding, you know, what you do or not do. And so, yeah, there's definitely things to think about. But I think any life choice, you're going to have financial questions, or you may be asked to step outside your comfort zone. So I think these preacher's wife things just fall into those same two categories, and maybe some others, but comfort zones and, you know, just jump, yeah.
I didn't really have fears going in, but that's probably because I grew up in a PK home, and you know, I loved it. So, but I had fearful moments in ministry, and the one that comes to mind is, you know, I've gone forward a couple of times, and I really wrestled with that in my heart. And it wasn't that you're the preacher's wife, you don't need to be going forward, what will people think? It wasn't that. It was just, I don't want to, is this going to discourage anybody somehow? Are they going to think that Neil and I are having problems? Is this, you know, it was, is it okay for me to go forward and ask for forgiveness, or say that I need strength, or, you know, whatever the occasion was? That was a very fearful moment for me, because, I mean, Neil didn't even know. So he's standing, he preached, and he's standing up there during the invitation. Then I'm like, going forward.
I would think that would be a hugely powerful moment for the congregation.
Well, and it, of course, you are not surprised at all to learn that everybody was extremely loving and supportive, and, you know, I mean, it was wonderful. That's God's family. But those have been fearful moments for me, because I could feel that, like, I can hardly breathe, I'm scared to death, but I need to do this. Yeah. And
Because you're a Christian, not because you're a
Right.
preacher's wife.
And that's
Right.
That's because you're part of that family of God at that location. And sometimes I think we get the idea that our husband is the employee of this organization instead of plugging in as a member of this organization. You know, we're kind of set over here in our minds, or someone's mind, that we're the employees, we're on the payroll, and we're not really plugging in as a Christian sister who might need prayers one day. So yay.
I think it's a little fearful of people knowing details about John in particular. You know, they notice when he gets a haircut and when he's got a new tie, or they pay attention when he goes through the potluck and what he likes, and then they bring what he likes. And so I was a little protective of him in that sense, that maybe it's possessive is a better word than protective, because, you know, some things you just want to have private. But I think I got rid of that pretty quick, because it just ended up being a blessing, because most of the time it's little old ladies that just want to hug on him and pat
And
him.
then you get pies delivered to your house regularly.
You do, yeah. So
Perception.
yeah, exactly,
And
perception.
And that's their talent, and that's what they can do. So.
I think mine is not so much a fear of anything specifically, but maybe just the unknown. And, you know, being first generation Christian, raising, you know, I think that, and that may not even fall into the preacher's wife category, but it does in a way. Just fear of the unknown. I don't know what it looks like down the road. I don't know, you know, what it looks like to raise. First of all, I don't know what it looks like to have a Christian home. You know, and then on the preacher side of it, I don't have a clue what that looks like. I don't have a clue what it looks like in 10 years. And are my little girls, you know, are we going to do the right thing? Are we going to do this the right way? Are they going to, you know, be the stereotypical PK kids? You know, how do we do this the right way? So just not even fear, just awareness that there, you know, a little bit of the unknown can be cause some anxiety sometimes. But we're just very blessed to have a lot of mentors, I think, in looking to women like you and saying, okay, it's going to be okay. You know, that my girls are going to be okay. We're going to be okay. And trusting in God, of course. But that's been my only, you know, fear, I guess.
I remember Neil sharing with me something that he learned probably from Wendell Winkler, but I don't know that for sure, but about the unknown, you know, for the preacher boys just stepping out into ministry for the first time, and they were told just no matter what, always love God and love the brethren, you know, God's church, love God and his people. And if that comes across in your demeanor, the church will forgive a lot. And other people will forgive a lot, because we all are so flawed. And we are going to mess up, and we're going to disappoint people, and we're going to say hurtful things unintentionally or intentionally and drop the ball. I mean, you name it, we're going to do it at some point. But if they know that you genuinely love God and you genuinely love his people, you'll work through that and you'll learn from it and grow from it, and the church will forgive a lot.
I think there's a perception, just kind of wrapping this up, but there's a perception of the preacher is, you know, the typical, he's the counselor in the congregation, and he's the comforter of the ones who need comfort, and he's the encourager, he's the leader. But what happens when the leader needs to be led, and what happens when the comforter needs comforting, and what happens when the encourager needs to be encouraged? And I think there may be some who fear these needs that preachers have, and who's going to fill those needs for them. But I don't know about y'all, but I imagine that you've seen that those needs have been met in many ways when those needs arise for your husband and for your family, when you need that the encouragement and the leadership. So that's something that I guess I've thought of people might be fearful of, but
Some are afraid of loneliness, you know, because they feel like they won't be able to be as close to other people, or they'll feel isolated in some way. And again, you know, God meets that need. Don't ever feel lonely. Usually you're wanting some more alone time.
yeah. Especially those who need the alone time to recharge a little bit. Okay, the last question. What have you loved in your ministry about seeing how perceptions have changed as your relationships develop within the church? It's kind of a long question, but have things changed as people got to know you, and where has God blessed you in that? Maybe you went into a relationship thinking, we're not going to be able to be friends, and God changed that. Perceptions have changed. How has God blessed you in that?
I'm probably answering this the wrong way.
No, wrong
But you said something that made me think, you know, you go into a situation thinking, we will never be friends. You know, we have perceptions of other people too.
Yeah.
Not just them of us, but, you know, elders and other members, and those first introductions when you draw your conclusions right off the bat, and the people that you think you'll be close to, excuse me, most of the time you're not. Yeah. And the ones that you think are going to be the thorn in your side end up being your best friend, you know, and those are fun, and that's God at work and turning those things into relationships. And I think it goes back to, you know, continuing to be real and be yourself, and jump in and serve wherever you're supposed to, and then God kind of works everything out.
Go into the work with your arms wide open, with your heart wide open, and wait and see what He will do with that.
Yes, thank you. That's what I meant to say.
Anybody else? All right. Good discussion. Thank you.